It is Nadine at 9, Friday, October 25th, 2024. And it is 11 days until the election. I hope everybody is ready and as excited as I am to have it be over. I'm praying, obviously, for a positive outcome when it's over, and that it will be over when it's supposed to be over and not drag on for weeks and weeks. That would be nice. But I'm definitely ready for some results, and I'm ready to move forward with positive results. I'm ready I'm ready. So you can go and vote early. I think in most states, I know in Missouri, early voting started on Tuesday, and it will go until, I believe, the Monday evening before the 5th, which is election day. So I would encourage you to go vote early. It's been, I've talked about this, I think, a little bit last week, that there's, in the past, there's been kind of difference of opinions, I guess, about voting early. But honestly, it kind of seems like at this point, you should probably just go vote early so that way you can make sure and get your vote in. Because you just never know. You never know what's going to happen on November 5th. Just like we don't know what's going to happen with the cybersecurity training that was scheduled for November 5th. Seems so incredibly coincidental that there's already something major happening that day, and then they wanted to schedule cybersecurity attack training. So very odd. Anyway, I think you should go vote early. You might disagree with me, and in the past, I've disagreed with me for what I'm saying now, but I do. I think you should go vote early, and I think that you should be prepared when you go vote early. So if you don't feel prepared, don't go and vote yet. Miss A will be on the show with me next Friday to go through everything that'll be on the ballot for everyone in Missouri, but then also specifically for those in Camden and Miller County. There are a lot of things on there. And not just with candidates, there are, as we've talked about several times, lots of amendment questions, which changes the Missouri Constitution, then also a Prop A question, which changes or adds Missouri state law. So these things affect you. These are what govern our state, and you need to know what they are. And then you need to make an educated decision on how to vote. And we're trying to help you do that. So tune in. You can also find all of my shows when I've been talking about these amendments in more detail for the past couple months. I'm kind of in transition right now. I've been uploading my shows to YouTube, and then I realized, with the help of some friends, that I could actually start just uploading them to podcast platforms. So I've been doing that. It makes it much easier to listen to. So you can find my show specifically, if you can't catch me live at Damn Radio at 9 on Friday mornings. You can find my show, Nadine at 9, on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And I do have, like I said, my shows on YouTube, Nadine at 9, but I am going to stop uploading to that the end of this month because it costs money to convert my radio shows into video format. So I'm not going to do that anymore, especially because I think that Spotify and Apple Podcasts are sufficient. So I hope that you will find me there and share those shows. Not because I feel like I'm really great and people need to hear my voice, but because, as I've said many times, I believe God has given me this platform, and there's been some really, really good information that has come out on these shows, just like all the other shows on Damn Radio, which I'll go ahead and just talk about right now. You can download the Damn Radio app and get push notifications for whenever there is going to be a show or a special program. In between the shows, though, there's great music. The way that they structure everything is just really good listening music. So yeah, you can find all of that on the Damn Radio app, or you can find my show specifically, Nadine at 9, and then I think that one day soon we'll have everyone else's shows available as well to listen to archived. But this week, of course, later today, I don't know if this is an accident, but JR's show from 2 to 4 is no longer the really big show. It's called A Really Big Shoe. So JR, I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but I like it because you do have really big shoes to fill. So JR is Monday through Friday, 2 to 4, right here in the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Arts Studio at Damn Radio. And then Saturday nights, 8 to 10, is Polly's Bomb Track Bunker. Excuse me. Almost like a tongue twister this morning. And then Tuesday from 4 to 5:30 is International Flavor with Sam Trapp. Those are pretty interesting. 5:30 to 7:30 is the Show Me History show, where they talk about Missouri history. And I love history. I do not know as much about Missouri history specifically, so I think that's really interesting. And then on Wednesday, October 30th, is the triumphant return of Gabby Hayes. He will be here from 11 to 1. And then JR's Really Big Shoe from 2 to 4. Radio Free Missouri with Ike, 6 to 8. And then Thursday, again, is A Really Big Shoe. JR, you're going to have to tell me if that's on purpose or not, because I think it's so funny. Anyway, then Thursday, 4 to 5:30 is International Flavor again with Sam Trapp. And then Thursday evening is the Fitzwell Factor with Richard Fitzwell and his Red Stapler, 6 to 8 p.m. And then you're right back here with me next Friday, November 1st, for Nadine at 9. So you have your whole week planned out for you, or I planned it out for you. Sometimes it works out better when someone else plans it for you, I think. So you can join us all week, and then, like I said, in between time, keep it on for some nice, easy listening here at Damn Radio. It's gonna be a fun-filled couple of weeks. You know, I was thinking the other day, I don't know if, I mean, I don't, not to be a negative Nancy, but I don't know if this will ever happen, but if things calm down politically, I really don't know how many shows I'll be able to fill. So maybe you guys can send in some ideas for what you'd like to hear about. That'd be kind of fun. You can find me on Facebook at Nadine at 9 if you want to submit some comments, or you can just go to the Damn Radio page on Facebook and submit some comments. Yeah, so, okay, moving on. We are gonna, or I promise I don't have multiple personalities. I am going to have Nathan Todisman and Grace Hosmanek. I do not know if I'm pronouncing those names correctly. I mean, Nathan and Grace, I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. But they're going to have to tell me about their last names. I'm really excited for this show because I met Nathan and Grace, goodness, I don't know, a little over a month ago, I think, at a conference in Springfield, Branson-ish area. And they're younger but they were with Turning Point USA, and it was just a breath of fresh air to talk to them because it it just showed that there is definitely hope. I mean, I think that there's been definitely some failure in certain generations to raise up the next generation in a way that teaches them how important it is to be involved in the community and the state and the country and the world. But that seems to be changing. There definitely seems to be a massive wave of conservatism cons- conservatism within college age kids. And I think that's wonderful. And like I said, it gives lots of hope. Not because I'm hopeful in the people, of course, but because I see the Spirit of God working in a new generation. And to be honest, it's seemed kind of like that's been lost for a few decades. That, Christians have kind of pushed aside their responsibilities in the culture. And I'm not just talking about politically, I'm talking about like in the culture. We're supposed to be light in the world, and that light needs to shine in every area, not just one area. So I'm just excited to see this new generation, and I'm looking forward to talking to them and hearing their perspectives and hearing their testimonies, because I think that it will inspire a lot of you, but then I also hope that it will just kind of share some wisdom with parents and kids, teens who are looking to go to college, that it will shed some light on what's going on and maybe give some alternatives, some different perspectives on areas that you can get involved without attending college. It's the world's different. The world continues to change, and the things that a lot of people used to think were necessary and important really are not necessary and important anymore in a lot of situations. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with them. But until they come, I just want to take a second and praise God for the rain that we finally got here in Missouri. I don't know if it was all over the state, and it's still kind of cloudy, so I'm hoping that maybe he will give us some more rain. But goodness, I have just been praying for rain for days, and it was not looking good. And God gave us some rain. So thank you, Lord, for that. We appreciate it. This weekend is going to be fun filled for myself, and I hope that you all have great plans in store, and that you just take the time, that no matter what's going on around you, I know that it can be very easy to get lost in the world. It can be very easy to get caught up in everything that's going on and to get discouraged. But we serve a God who is bigger and greater and has already won the war. So just take time to praise him, to worship him, to thank him, and to seek his will for you. And when he tells you to get up and do something, be ready to get up and do something. But when he tells you that it's time to rest and worship, then rest and worship. In Exodus, there's a verse that I love that says, well, it's talking about, there is when the Israelites came out of Egypt, and it says, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. And I just think That's reassuring because it's true. Sometimes we just need to be still. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
Morning.
Good morning, both of you. Are you both on the same call?
We
Yes.
are.
Okay, great. I wasn't exactly sure how that was going to work, so I probably should have asked ahead of time.
That's okay. Nate's got it covered. He's always a step ahead. So
Oh, well, good. Perfect. So I don't know if you were listening beforehand, but I tried to pronounce both of your last names, and I don't know if I got it correctly, but I said Nathan Todisman. Is that right?
Yep.
hmm
Okay.
Yes.
And Grace Hosmanek?
Osmonic, close enough.
Osmonic. Ah, so close. I
Yeah,
had
it's Slovak.
the
Nobody knows how to pronounce that.
wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
That's all right. That's all right.
Well, I was just telling everyone about you guys and how encouraging it was to talk to you. I don't even remember how long ago it was now. I think it was maybe the beginning of September at that conference, and just hearing, talking to a younger generation who cares and who's not just sitting on the sidelines. So I'm just gonna get right into it, and whichever with either one of you that wants to start, if you just want to share a little bit about who you are and your backstory, and then we'll just kind of lead into your college testimony.
Cool. I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
So I got both my undergraduate and graduate degree at UW-Milwaukee, which is a pretty liberal college, as you can probably expect, with it being in the city. I was not liberal growing up. I actually grew up Christian conservative, but I wouldn't have considered myself a Christian from ages like 10 to like 21, 22.
Mm.
Um, so I probably would have considered myself liberal in high school, and then practically socialist in college. And I started to question a lot of that in my last 2 years of my undergraduate studies. And there's a lot of pushback when I did question things. I was in the education program, and we were we had to teach CRT, critical race theory, and it brought a lot of questions in my mind. I thought to myself, why am I teaching students in the inner city that I am oppressing them to this day when I'm paying thousands of dollars a year to teach them and help them? And when I brought these things to my own classrooms and I asked my professors, I was shut down.
Mm.
So from there, I just started questioning more things, and I took a couple economics classes as well, which obviously does not really jive with liberal economics, which is kind of an oxymoron, I guess. So that really is what kind of started my transition into becoming conservative.
Okay. So when you say I just lost the word that you used, but when you approached your professors, oh, you said that you were shut down. So what do you mean by that? So you came to them and were basically like, I'm teaching what? Like I'm teaching something that I don't think is accurate, and then what was their response?
Well, it was the response of my entire class as well. And they just said, no, we still are oppressors because we're white. And it was a lot of things like that that occurred. And I'm actually really glad that I kind of missed the cutoff for having to teach like gender studies as well, because I
Mm.
am pretty sure that that's probably something that's included in these programs now. So I'm glad I graduated before that time. But yeah, I was just met with just a lot of animosity. People were
Mm.
upset that I was even bringing it up. And so I, after that, decided not even to go into teaching because I didn't see a place for me, especially once I came back to the faith as well. And I was in my master's program at that time studying HR. I just didn't see a future in education for myself.
Hmm. Wow. Do you think that that's happening quite a bit with people that are going into education and then finding out what they're being taught that they're supposed to teach? Do you think that that's happening with people dropping out of that program?
Um, Possibly.
Mm.
I think for me, I was definitely not ready to teach in some of Milwaukee's, I would say, toughest schools. I taught elementary education for 2 years within that program, and I had gone to a private Christian school first through fifth grade. I homeschooled from sixth through seventh grade or eighth grade, and then I went to public high school in the suburbs. So I was
Mhm.
not at all ready for that experience. But yeah, I think a lot of people are probably turned away from education because of things that we are told that we have to teach, and they don't give us an option.
Yeah, that would be really hard. Yeah. Well, so do you want to share more? Nathan, you want to jump in?
Um, yeah, great. Or Grace, are you good?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, awesome. So I guess a little background on me. Had a little bit different journey than Grace. I actually grew up in a Democrat household. I say Democrat, not liberal, because my mom was a liberal. My dad was more conservative socially, but he always voted Democrat, mostly due to being in the union. But I'm sure he had other reasons. But from my understanding, that was the main reason for that. By the time I got to midway through high school, my older sister was a political science major, and she was big into like the Bernie Sanders movement stuff. So at that point in my life, I was a socialist, just because, for lack of a better word, because I honestly more so a lack of understanding and just kind of following what my family said.
Right.
Um, so I was that way until I was about 19, 18 or 19. Um, After I graduated high school, I was given a book by Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. I read that and did not like it for the first time I read it. First time I read it, I really did not like it. I essentially threw it down. I read like 2 chapters or 3 chapters. Um, Later on, like I said, I was maybe 19. I kind of gave it another shot. I had just started college. I started college a semester later than initially expected because I had moved to Wyoming. Um, you know, was chasing a dream out there.
Mhm.
Kind of a mistake. Young, bad decision making. Um,
It
Yep.
happens.
Yep.
and
We learn from
yeah,
those.
yes, definitely. And so I come back and everything's kind of in shambles. My relationship with my family's a little in shambles. I'm trying to figure out this college thing that I never thought I was gonna do. I was close to failing out of high school. Like I was never a student. And so I reread the book, um, and it's all about personal responsibility. It's not a huge jump to go from personal responsibility to a more conservative worldview. Um, Personally, I'm more like libertarian leaning, but it's very similar.
Right.
So that's kind of where I come from. And then you wanted to ask about my college experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If you can share a little
Okay,
bit about that.
cool. So in college, by the time I really got into the swing of things, my freshman year, I pretty much just kind of went to school and went home and, you know, did not do the college experience
Mm.
thing, pretty much avoided it. Like I said, I was having rough times coming back into, life, essentially.
Right.
Um, my second year, I started getting into the swing of things. I took a political science class that was just a, throwaway, right?
Mm.
I I started school as an engineer. I switched to psychology like midway through. I couldn't tell you when I actually switched, but at some point I did. So I needed to fill in gen eds, and I took a political science class, like the intro level one. And this is kind of when I started to get more interested in the stuff. Like, obviously, I had my political viewpoints, but I kind of kept them to myself and didn't really care that much. Um, it was at that point that I was in a political science class. My teacher was He's from somewhere in Africa, like South Africa.
Okay.
Um, and he was teaching critical race theory stuff. He was talking about, um, Missouri schools, and how we need to fund urban schools more in order to fix them, and stuff like this. He talked a lot about how the government needs to fix these problems. And so I just started writing my papers, essentially trying to debunk everything he was saying in class, because I got tired of being asked. The questions were written in a way where it seemed like there was no option that maybe the government wouldn't get involved, right?
Okay.
Um, so the question is, okay, we have a problem with, um, I'll just pick a random thing, homelessness in this country, right? How can the government fix that?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And when you phrase the question that way, the only option is to pick a way for the government to do something. And the way I would always answer the question is, the best thing the government can do is get out of housing, get out of
Yeah.
whatever the thing is. It makes it worse. And generally, a lot of my arguments got shot down, and in some cases it was probably fair. I wasn't super developed in my
Mm-hmm.
political arguing skills, but that was the start. I by my junior year I was door knocking for candidates, and then uh, ended up continuing on with that organization that I had worked for, and now I work full time, conservative politics. In that time, somewhere in there, I found God again after losing a relationship with Him, around the time I was 19. So I came back to God again in my early 20s. And still in my early 20s, but
Yeah.
and still working on it as we all are.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
definitely been a journey, and I can say college was not the thing that most of my conservative values were shut down in college, not
Mm-hmm.
encouraged. And
Mm-hmm.
it took an outside organization to convince me that this is a path that I should even go on. Because
Right.
everybody in my life told me politics is a waste of time. Even religion is a waste of time. Really, the only person in my life who ever really enforced a religious background was my dad. So it wasn't until I met Grace that I kind of started getting that support on that side of things. So
Mm.
definitely been an interesting journey. And I'd like to,
Yeah.
send it back to Grace, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I, I just find it so interesting how, and I'm just going to use the term the left, the liberal, like hardcore liberal leaning, are always talking so much about how conservatives and Christians are just so exclusive, and we don't care about other people, and we don't listen to other people. And then what's happening, I mean, this is the story that I hear happening all across colleges, and then even in some like high schools, middle schools, that kids who have a more conservative or potentially Christian viewpoint are just told basically to sit down and shut up, that they're not allowed to speak, they're not allowed to have a different opinion like that. As long as you're going to stand up and agree with whatever is being taught, then it's fine to have a voice, but otherwise you can't. It's just you need to stay quiet. So I think I guess so. I'm curious a little bit, and this might be kind of jumping tracks, but stick with me.
Yeah.
um,
That's okay. Go for it.
my concern is that a lot of parents and a lot of teenagers think that they are strong enough to go into a college setting and survive. without falling prey to what you guys are talking about, just the fact that it's like you really can't be a Christian conservative and have any kind of a voice that's at least respected in a lot of these college campuses. And so my concern is that these kids go in thinking, well, I am a strong enough Christian, or whatever, and then they just get devoured. So can you talk to that a little bit? Like, what has been your experience, not just personally, but what you've seen with peers or just like within the organization that you're in?
I guess
Yeah.
if I can, can I jump in?
Yeah, go, Grace.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I really wanted to echo what Nate said about feeling like I could not be conservative, and about how that sentiment is probably pretty widely shared, especially in academia. They say that going to college generally makes you more liberal. I think Nate would agree when we say that it actually made us really conservative. And I think it's even in the way that a lot of young, I'll say liberals, conduct themselves, because I was in that group. I was in that crowd. I did go to, the good old college protests for whatever social justice movement it was. And I think that even the behavior and conduct of my peers who aligned with the left really turned me off from the Democrat Party. So it wasn't even just policy-wise. I think it was just in the way that they treated other people, especially those who disagreed with them. There was no room for that. So I think that it's really important to recognize that, yeah, you can be conservative. You are allowed to be. Heck, I mean, Democrats 20, 30, 40 years ago were rather conservative. So
Right.
when I tell you that it's okay to be conservative and have your head screwed on straight, to be quite frank, it's not a bad path is what I would say. So I would recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting perspective, what you said about, because I mean, I've witnessed several family friends who have sent their what they think are Christian conservative kids to college, and it completely flips them the other way. So it's interesting your perspective when, it's like you kind of went in on the more liberal leaning side, but it kind of flipped you to the conservative side.
Yeah, it happens. God
Yeah.
works in weird ways.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely.
sometimes we go to college.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much.
Uh,
Go ahead, Nathan.
I was just going to jump in on it. I think I don't want to talk too much on it because I think actually Grace's experience aligns more with the college side of things, because I kind of started coming into conservatism before I went to college. I was a little bit outside of it, but I will say that I think there is a level of when you really care about school and you really want to do well in school, and then you go to college, in order to do well in school, you don't argue with a professor. You don't go against what people say. So I think it's a bigger risk for, somebody like Grace who is, into school, like school. It's a bigger risk for somebody like that to go to college and, become more left leaning because they care more. Whereas, like I said, I almost failed out of high school. Even in college, like especially early college, I was never that concerned as long as I was like great. So I think I had less of a concern about kind of putting my views out there, questioning things, and that helped a lot. But it's definitely a concern. I have a lot of friends who were actually conservative. I was the socialist guy in high school, surrounded by conservative friends. Some of those conservative friends became more liberal in college, and now I'm the conservative guy. It's an interesting thing, and I think that's a much more common story than Grace and I's, is that people are going left, as you said. And I guess I don't know. I think there was a question in there somewhere. or an answer to a question, but I'm losing it at this point, so we'll just move on.
Good stuff. We're
Yeah.
having a
No,
good conversation, but yeah.
yeah, I appreciate you guys sharing your perspectives like that, because it's good, and always absolutely we need to remember that God works in lots of different ways, and we shouldn't put him in a box for sure.
Right.
So in I guess, I'm not near a college campus really where I live. I'm not involved in that life. Are you guys very, can I say like that you're with Turning Point? Is that okay for me to say that?
Yes, I mean
Okay.
yes. So
Okay.
yes, I work for Turning Point. You can say that. Yes.
Okay.
I don't
You
work for Turning Point, so if you said it, it wouldn't be accurate. So it
okay.
doesn't apply to me. So
Okay. So Nathan, you work for Turning Point USA,
Yes.
which is, do you want to talk a little bit about Turning Point?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, my full-time job is the high school representative for Turning Point in Missouri. So my job is to essentially give high school students who are lean conservative kind of a place to be, right? I hate using the word safe space because that's
Yeah.
a rough word, but I do like to say, like, look, in schools where there is no place for conservatives to actually have their viewpoint, you can't talk about it. If you use somebody's pronouns wrong, well, then you're in a whole heap of trouble. So
yep.
it's definitely a rough environment to be conservative in. To an extent, I didn't realize when I was in high school. And so my job is to get the students, and often they're like some of the best performing students in the school. They often are the conservative students. And they want to start these clubs, and they run into all kinds of trouble, trying to make a voice for conservatives. And so I kind of help facilitate that.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Nice. And yeah, I think we had briefly discussed that, or maybe you talked about it more with my husband, but I didn't realize that that was specifically what you do. And I think that that's really needed for sure. Because, kids need to grow up in, they need to be able to have opinions and talk about opinions and work through things and be challenged, and so that way they can hopefully grow to be responsible, confident adults. So
Yes.
yeah, I like that. And Grace, what is it that you do?
So I currently work in HR for a manufacturing company. Although I really would love to do Nathan's job. So I definitely am looking towards doing something more geared towards politics. I'm really passionate about policy. I really love doing things like this, just talking and sitting down and going over not just some of my history with politics, but just the way this country is being run, where it's headed, how do we get here? That really fascinates me. So that's what I would like to do. So
Yeah.
I will be hopefully moving towards something in politics in the coming year. So.
Yeah. Do you have something, I know you talked about what you're passionate about, but do you have something specific that you might be working towards? Like a specific position or something?
That is a great question. I am not entirely sure. Like I said, I think what Nate does is awesome. And I'd love to help educate students. That was my undergrad, that's literally what I did. So to kind of combine that with politics would definitely intrigue me, but I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way, but I'm open. I'm open to different opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk a little bit about how you guys feel about our country, what the direction is, and just kind of like in the past few years, what you maybe have seen change, like within your peer groups or maybe what you've witnessed, even just your time in college? Like, have you seen any kind of a switch in either better or negative in those peer groups?
Hmm.
Yeah. If Nate, you want to go ahead.
Sorry,
you have
I was thinking
anything?
about the question.
Yeah, it's a loaded question. That's
Change in the peer.
So I get, okay, I'll narrow it down a little bit. So
Yes.
I, we obviously, most people know there were these protests and stuff going on, like these pro Hamas protests and stuff like that happening on college campuses. But then you also have the group of guys who are standing there holding up the flag, and so it, on a college campus where they're shouting pro Hamas things. Anyway, so it seems like there is a pretty big polarization maybe among college kids or that age range. I don't know. Obviously, I'm just saying what I'm seeing on media and what I hear about what's happening. And
right.
so I'm curious, like, from you guys who are that age range and you've pretty recently been on college campuses, what kind of vibe do you get from the majority of the kids? Like, are they thinking, wow, we need to do something to save our country because the people who are leading it are doing something wrong, or we need to do something to save it because we don't want someone else getting in there and doing something wrong? I mean, what is kind of like, is there a vibe of conservatism? Is there a vibe of what's going on?
I guess I will start out on this one because up until this year, I worked as a college representative. So I was doing essentially the same job I do now in college.
Okay.
And so I kind of experienced a lot of college campuses across the entire Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm particularly, geared to answer this question.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think most college students try not to think about it and are pretty apathetic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a sad thing to say, right? It's a little disappointing, but most college students are probably not going to vote, and if they do, they're going to vote for whoever their parents are voting for.
Mm-hmm.
And
Or
that's
their
a
friends,
shame, right?
honestly.
Right.
Sorry.
I said, or their
Friends?
friends, honestly. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Whatever the next thing is,
Mm-hmm.
And for a period of time when I was in college, the next thing did seem to be Trump, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I guess he's kind of an exciting character, right? So
Yeah.
people were like, "Cool, this guy's fun." Yeah. Especially younger guys are very much starting to turn that way. Now I'm not sure. Again, the apathy is so heavy in the air, like it's hard to tell what the actual general vibe of the
Right.
campus is. Obviously, there's still college students are going to always overwhelmingly be more liberal than conservative. It's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, the just intense apathy. Like college students essentially just mostly are like, I have better things to worry about, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's their general attitude. And so I hate to kind of give you a non-answer there, but that's kind of a lot of what I see.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that is an answer, and I think that that's very reflective of their parents. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that my generation, it has been very apathetic and just complacent. I mean, and so obviously that's probably what's been passed down to the majority of the kids. So that
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, it's very discouraging, especially when it's like, okay, you don't get it. Like, the stuff that's happening will affect you. You can't just stay in your bubble forever.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would say that some people are definitely getting more involved. I think our generation is unique, and I'm sure every generation would say that, right? But something that I've noticed is that there's been a really tangible shift,
Mm,
at least from what I've seen, towards libertarianism, especially within the Republican Party. And that is being driven by people who are our age. You're seeing Donald Trump, for example, saying, all right, I'm going to dismantle the Department of Education,
mm-hmm.
all those other three-letter organizations, and that's a really big step. People, I hope, are starting to wake up and are starting to realize, like Nathan said, that the government is not going to fix the problems it created.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I just recently finished a really good book by Thomas Sowell called Discrimination and Disparities, and it goes through the history of discrimination within our country within the last 100 years. And something that he really focuses on is the discrimination, quote unquote, within housing, and how the government programs to put lower income individuals into Section 8 housing, for example, in higher income neighborhoods, actually denigrates those neighborhoods
Mm-hmm.
more than anything else. And it's been proven, especially, for instance, when a lot of African Americans moved up from the South. There were African Americans who were vehemently against what they literally said were, quote unquote, those people coming up from the South because of the way that there was lawlessness, and it was just a huge shift in culture, and they didn't want that to occur. So it's not a racial issue there.
Mm-hmm.
And the government now can't go back and say, well, we should have not done those Section 8 housing projects. We should have allowed people to decide where they wanted to live
Yep.
and take care of their own communities. But now we are so deep into it that to admit that something like Section 8 was a failure and trying to forcefully integrate lower and middle income communities together was a failure, it can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that people are starting to wake up and realize that the government is not going to fix problems that it itself created.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I, the other week I was talking about FEMA because I've just, especially after things that happened in North Carolina, I just really was like, why have we allowed FEMA to operate for this long? It's that same kind of thought process of like, oh, the government's just going to come in and take care of it and fix it. And so then in my view, then people step back and they say, well, how's the government going to fix this? Like what Nathan said, when really it should be the people. Like we should be stepping in to help each other. But because we've allowed these government agencies to operate for so long, we then step back and say, well, you take care of it. And then, of course, when the government steps in to try and, quote, take care of something, it costs a lot of money and doesn't really get taken care of.
Yeah, I think our government is great at taking care of everyone who is not American. If you look at how much money we've sent to Ukraine, we could have built the border wall something like 6 or 7 times over. It's incredible, the billions of dollars that we have sent over. And then you see what North Carolina, what Florida looks like. And even if people try to go help their own neighbors and they try to put together efforts, they're being told to stand down by our own government. And it's a huge slap in the face for anyone living in those states that are affected when we literally just sent a huge amount of money to, I believe it was Iran, as a humanitarian aid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's incredible. And I can't fathom how people are still complacent paying the rate of taxes that we are right now and seeing where it's not going. It's not going towards our schools. I've taught in our schools. It's not going to our schools. We're not hiring good teachers. We're not getting kids the supplies we need. There are teachers who are having to buy breakfast for students out of their own pockets, supplies for students out of their own pockets. It's not going towards our infrastructure. I think we all saw that this year. Not going towards our roads. It's going to everyone but the people who are paying for it in the first place.
Yeah.
And if that isn't infuriating to people, I don't know what will be.
Yeah. I totally agree. I didn't realize, like, in the short conversation I had with you at the conference, I didn't realize how much I would enjoy talking to you.
Thank you.
Because I'm right there with you. I really enjoy talking about these things in a factual way, not just, spouting off whatever I think, but it's infuriating that people have been complacent for so long and are continuing to be complacent. And like you're saying on the college campuses, that there's still the complacency. I mean, it's just something that's continuing to be passed down from generation to generation. And I'm trying to think, like, when will the breaking point happen to where what generation is going to feel like, oh, we can't be complacent anymore. I just wonder how bad it's going to have to get, how much they're going to have to be squeezed before the mindset starts to change of, we have to actually do something because these things do affect us. I hope that it's soon. I mean, I hope that people wake up soon before it's squeezed too much. Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, I think we are closer to that than we know,
Mm-hmm.
or at least I hope. You look at Europe, and I hate to compare the United States to Europe. Liberals do that all the time. It makes me upset, but it's part of it. Europe is having that big, pendulum swing back, because if you look at Europe's policies, even today, but especially 5 years ago, they were overwhelmingly leftist. Everyone was saying it's a I'm doing air quotes right now, but post-Christian society,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what they like to call it. And now we're seeing, leaders getting elected in Europe that are, right wing, some even maybe a little too far right wing, but
Yeah.
right wing, Christian, good strong border policy, stuff
Right.
like that. That Europe was essentially lost. Everybody just assumed Europe was lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Europe was just going to be that way, and that's how it was going to go. And I think a lot of people assumed America would follow in its footsteps. And we're starting to see that there is hope. No matter how far left you go, things can come back, because when people start to get angry or scared even, things start to change very fast. And
Yeah.
I don't think we need to be angry or scared right now. I think we're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there may come a time where that does have to happen, and that's where there's going to be all that complacency is going to go away. People are going to start getting involved, and things will get at least modulate,
Right.
like become more reasonable.
Right.
And I hope to see that happen soon. And I think, based on what's going on, across the ocean, we will see it sooner than
Mm-hmm.
I would have even expected. So hopefully,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think do you think there's anything that could kind of inspire among college campuses to get involved? I mean, I know Turning Point does, like, that's what they do a lot of, is college campus stuff. And I feel like just, the podcast that I listened to from them, it seems like there is a movement. Do you feel like that's just what needs to keep happening, is just more going on to college campuses with these kind of rallies and stuff? Or, I mean, do you think that, I don't know, what do you think would help really change this vibe of complacency?
I think something
Um,
that really needs to happen. Oh, you can go ahead.
no, go ahead, honey.
All right. I think something that really needs to happen is that students need to begin educating themselves. There's
Mm.
a good quote that goes, "Never let your education get in the way of your learning."
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I have that on my board at home.
and oh, well, there you go. So you're well aware. I think it's by no coincidence that we as a country no longer teach history. We teach something called social studies now, which I always found peculiar.
Mm-hmm.
But it is by design. And I think it's really important for students to, really everyone, to do their own research, to read. Something that has been transformational in my life is starting with that book, 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. After that, I read Discrimination and Disparities. Now I'm reading The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis.
Mm.
Just start reading. That's what I would say, is to start reading. Read something like The Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn, right? That book solely, I would almost have to argue, took down Soviet Russia. That was the first swing of the axe into that humongous tree that is communism, that is socialism, that is the fall of any great nation, any great republic. So I would really encourage anyone just to start reading, read some of the history of this modern world, and you'll find out very quickly that socialism does not last,
Uh-huh.
communism does not last, and ultimately, when we have people in power, or people who seek power, people like Kim Walz, who say things like one man's socialism is another man's neighborliness.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to make some really awful, some really horrible ideas more palatable, in the name of justice and in the name of kindness. Um, you know, when the devil came to Adam and Eve, he didn't say, "I'm going to lead you straight to hell,"
Right.
right?
Right.
He said, "I will make you wise. I'll take the wool away from your eyes. You'll know the difference between good and evil."
Mm-hmm.
So I think we ought to be extremely careful and extremely knowledgeable about the road to hell and how that is paved with some social justice good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
So I really would just ask of everyone to dig into the history,
Mm-hmm.
that is not so far removed from us that they
Right.
are trying to seem like it's so far removed from us. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
Um,
What do you think, Nathan?
I guess I would add to that, and almost, um, I don't want to say argue against it because I'm not trying to argue. But what I
That's
would
okay. I'm no
say,
stranger to it.
yeah, well, what I would say is the people who have read, um, you know, people who are already conservative, who already have those values, um, I don't want to say stop reading, um, like read, but reading isn't gonna, you know, win the battle, so to speak. Um, you need to get out there and do something,
For
whatever
sure.
that may be. Do something you're good at, right? Um,
Yeah.
you know, what's my calling in this, you know, particular fight? I'm good working with students. I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it, and I can make a difference that way. Some people are very good at reading and understanding and, writing policies, things like that. Great. If that's your thing, do it. But if that's not your thing, go find your thing and do that instead. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess that would be kind of my slight critique is if you're like me where, I said I almost fell out of high school. I'm not a student. I'm not a learner in a lot of ways. I try to be. It's never worked out super well for me. But that doesn't mean I haven't read. Doesn't mean I don't understand the stuff. It's just, not my thing. So I figured out my thing.
Right.
Um, Everybody has their thing. Don't feel like you have to be put into a box in order to, do politics, spread the word
Mm-hmm.
of God, any
Mm-hmm.
of that stuff. You can do that with what you're good at, and
Absolutely.
please do. That's kind of my message. Just please do
Yeah.
whatever it is you're good at. Go do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's super important to at least find one person who's good at kind of calling out of you what you're good at. I think a lot of times people have just been in this routine their whole life of like someone told them to go to school, they went to school. Someone told them to go to college, they went to college. Someone told them they needed to get this job, they got this job. Someone told them they should get married, so they got married. And it's like almost this entire life of people telling them what decisions they should be making instead of them taking a second and being like, "Hey, I really should think for myself and figure out what I am good at and what I enjoy and what gets me upset, what gets me going, like what am I passionate about, what do I care about, instead of just kind of living in this I mean almost like this monotonous life of
Yeah.
complacency. But I
Yeah.
think that for a lot of times for so many people, they don't even know what it is they're really good at. They don't really know how to get involved in something totally new because it's totally new. So I think it's
Yeah.
important to find someone who can call those things out of you and then encourage you in that, because it's very overwhelming. I know when I first started getting involved with politics a couple years ago, but more specifically this year with Missouri politics, it's it's so overwhelming. I try and read legislation and I have no idea. Like that's not my gifting. My gifting is not reading legislation and understanding it. My gifting is I want to spread the word and activate people. But, we
Right.
need all different kinds. It can't just be one kind. So I like both of your answers.
Yeah, I think you definitely are onto something there. And I think about people just going with the flow, doing what they're told. That's a very liberal mindset if you think about it. Going back to what Nathan said about personal responsibility and how that is not a very large step excuse me, from conservatism. And if you think about it further into policy and how liberals believe that the government is essentially their god,
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to solve the problems within their own communities, so they delegate it to the government.
Mm.
Well, there's a lot of homelessness. Well, the government ought to fix that. And it comes out of laziness, is
Yep.
honestly what it comes out of. It comes out of a lack of personal responsibility. And I think, not to, move off that track too much, but
Oh, go
for
ahead.
me personally, something that was very difficult for me to come to terms with was the issue of abortion. That
Mm.
was probably the last liberal stronghold in my belief system that had to crumble down. And I'll even go so far as to say that a good friend of mine, someone who I went to college with, interviewed me actually for an article when UW Milwaukee hosted a drag show, and it featured, this was right after the whole Roe versus Wade scandal and
Mm.
how that was overturned. They featured a drag show with a drag artist who went on stage and held a baby doll attached to a fake umbilical cord that was attached under their dress. And at the time, I was pro-choice. I was still somewhat on the
Mm-hmm.
left,
Mm-hmm.
but even that was too far for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the issue of abortion in general, and I'll make it short and sweet, is that it all comes down to personal responsibility. And I think that once I realized that the reason that I myself and a lot of other people are pro-choice is because they don't want to take personal responsibility for their own actions.
1,000%.
And when pregnancy occurs, people do not want that responsibility. So I think that taking responsibility for your own life and saying, well, maybe I don't want to go to college. Maybe I want to go into the trades. Maybe I want to work with high schoolers and help them have a place to be conservative. Anything like that is a step in the right direction. You have to own your own future.
Yeah, absolutely. You have anything to comment on that, Nathan?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that echoes what I had said before a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, but yeah, I think I very much agree that, yeah, a lot of people do go through life just kind of as if it's a ladder, right? And there's rungs already set up, and you hear the word climbing the corporate ladder, right?
Mm-hmm.
A ladder is a two-dimensional object. Like, can we not do any better than that? Can we not, climb the climbing wall, climb the octagon? I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Do your thing. Explore everything. And I was very lucky to go to a grade school and a high school that kind of lets you explore your whatever whatever
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to do, basically. And while both of those schools were very liberal leaning, that was kind of the positive edge of it, was that they were kind of very open to you just going out and figuring out what you wanted to do. I don't think most people have that luxury. I think most people, you're born into a family of dentists.
Yeah.
They're all like, you're going to be a dentist,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
it might be. A dentist is a great calling. Maybe you want to be a dentist, but not everyone's a dentist. Not everyone who's born to dentist is a dentist. I think finding, your path and not following the ladder, but, exploring everything a little bit, just enough to decide if you like it, is
Right.
very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I know
Well said.
I'm thankful I didn't grow up in a home that was like, you have to go to college, you have to start a career, blah, 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 blah. Like, this is the route that you're going to go. And
Mm-hmm.
which was good because that was not my route at all. I mean, all I wanted to do when I was growing up was travel and help people. I mean, I remember saying that when I was a little girl, and that was kind of always my mindset, was I just wanted to travel. And I really loved volunteering and serving and hosting and things like that. And so, I mean, I ended up working in the restaurant industry for years. And I mean, some people look down on restaurant workers and stuff as almost like, that's your starter job kind of a thing. But I would take that any day over climbing the corporate ladder because it enabled me
Yeah.
to travel all over the country. I met some really interesting people. I was active. I was having different conversations every day. And I made great money. Like, I had
Yeah.
a really flexible schedule. And so it's just, I'm thankful that, kind of like what you're saying, Nathan, that you had an environment, at least in high school, that was kind of encouraging you to find out, to experience different things, to find out where you should go. And I think so much of what is happening now, and maybe I'm sure has been happening for years, and I just haven't noticed as much, is it's almost, it's kind of like there's no more critical thinking happening. It's more of like, we're going to tell you what to think, and we're going to
Yeah.
kind of point you in the direction that we think you're going to be good at. And we're going to mold you into this type of person so that way you can do this kind of work, so that way you can do this for, the government, basically. And
Yeah. I mean, you can't even get through college without taking gen eds that are focused around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've got a friend who's going back to school and getting her bachelor's, and she called me and she's like, Grace, I can't not take these classes. I have to. It's completely unrelated to my major, and yet I have to. And I mean, you see programs like Women in Gender Studies. What the heck do you do with the Woman in Gender Studies major?
how do they even know what a
what
woman
you do
is?
Well, they can't define it, so they don't even know what they're studying.
Yeah.
But I mean, the point is to go be a social justice warrior, to be disruptive, and to work for the government, or work in some ridiculous faction of a company like the DEI director.
Yep.
It's ridiculous. It really boggles the mind.
Yeah. Can you talk for just a second about, because I know a lot of people hear these terms, DEI and critical race theory and all of this stuff. Can you, and both of you, feel free to jump in, can you kind of define those a little bit, break it down a little bit more for like the common person, to when they hear that term, they can think like, oh, this is why I don't want this?
Sure. Yeah. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. So within that, in a nutshell, it promotes exclusion and discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, when I was studying HR, getting my master's in HR, something that they really drilled into us was the importance of hiring diverse candidates. And they continued to synonymously and erroneously use the words equality and equity. And something that I constantly pointed out was that equity means that people are treated differently. In this case, based on immutable characteristics, things like race, things like sex, things like national origin,
Mm-hmm.
things you can't change about yourself. And people are being hired based upon those qualifications rather than merit. And I was told, no, we treat people equally. I'm like, no, you don't, because if we were treating people equally, they would have the same opportunities. They wouldn't end up at the same place, which is the goal of equity. And we would hire them based on merit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one example of what DEI is. Within critical race theory, that, pop quiz on this, that was, I believe, I do not remember exactly who coined that term. So critical race theory essentially teaches that the white man in particular is the root of all evil. The white man invented things like colonization, slavery, never mind that these things have been occurring interracially, actually, for millennia
Right.
at this point. So that teaches that to this day, because this country once allowed people to own slaves, that to this day, African Americans are still oppressed. Any person of color, as they put it, is oppressed, especially, now getting into the issue of sex, and I refuse to use the word gender because that only gives leverage and gives credibility to that entire fallacious ideology that there is gender, and there simply is not. But critical race theory even goes so far as to say, well, now if you are a trans Black person, you're higher up on the victim hierarchy. You are more oppressed, and you are either the oppressed or the oppressor. So if you're wondering why so many young white men and women are now identifying as things like non-binary, it's because they don't want to be in the oppressor class, because you are by default, by your immutable characteristics, either the oppressed or an oppressor. So now they've created an entire victim class that you can transform into at your will.
Interesting. I hadn't even thought about that side of it with, I'm trying to process that, like the irony of that with, now there's this fluidity that you can just pick whatever kind of gender you want to be. And so if someone's telling you, well, if you're a white straight man, you're the worst of the worst. And so then, someone who really, again, like doesn't know how to think for themselves, they're just going to want to try and get into whatever category they can get into, that they're not going to be seen as the oppressor anymore. I just hadn't even thought about that side of it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of social pressure around that as well, especially on college campuses. And I'm sure, Nate, you've seen it in the high schools as well, that if you are conservative or you're Christian, that loses you social credit points, if you will. And it ostracizes you to stand up for your faith and to stand up for your beliefs. And it's not easy, but it is worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, and it'll be absolutely worth it when we answer for it after this life is over. That's, that has to be the motivating factor in everything, is like, it can't, yes, we are to be responsible with this time we have here on earth, but ultimately, my goal is, what am I going to answer for when I'm standing before God?
Right. Forever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like Jesus said, you will be hated because of me. You will be persecuted in my name. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And I think it's it's a trial, and we are to be joyful in trial, and in good times as well. And I hope that people have the courage and the confidence, and really suit up in the armor of God to stand up for when there's something that is not right, even if it is difficult, even if it ostracizes you, even if it costs you your job. I think at the end of the day, we have to make sacrifices, and obviously some people are in positions where they can make bigger sacrifices in those ways than others. But in whatever personal capacity, you can stand up for your beliefs and for what you know is right. I
Absolutely.
implore everyone listening to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's what it's going to take. That, especially here in Missouri with a few of the ballot amendment initiatives, but especially with Amendment 3, I've talked about it a lot on the show, is just it's going to take every single person sitting inside a church saying that they're following God to actually get outside the church and tell people what the truth is. We cannot allow this evil to happen in our state. I mean, obviously I care about the country and the world, but right now I'm in Missouri, and so I'm fighting as hard as I can
Right.
to protect our state from falling even further into these evil traps. But it's like it takes every single person that is sitting on a pew every Sunday saying they follow God to actually get out and follow God and do what he's calling us to do. And he's calling us to speak up.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree.
Nathan,
Nate,
did you
did you
have
want
anything?
to add anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, I would agree with everything you said there. Essentially, at this point, um, you have a very clear line between good and evil, which you don't have most of the time. So it's interesting because there was a time when um, you some people might even say Democrats were the good guys at one point. Like there's a time where Republican and Democrat was a grayer line, and now it's gotten to the point where, like, sure, there are things I can disagree with, that the Republican Party has done, the conservatives have done. But at the end of the day, there has never been a clearer time who the good guy is.
Yeah.
In my mind, there's one group that's, trying to kill babies, and there's one group that's not.
Right. Right.
And especially in this particular case where you have such an extreme amendment, is a very clear, correct vote. And this is the crazy part, is you're talking about people being in churches who all need to stand up. And we're seeing people who go to what, claim to be churches. And the churches are, all about Amendment 3. They're all good with it.
That's true. I have seen that.
That's wild to me. That's something that, like, it's practically spelled out for you, in the Bible, what you should do. And, people are so caught up in, I guess, their worldview that they can't see that. Because, I always have a hard time trying to pin malicious intent on people. But the road to hell is not paved with, malicious intent, right?
Right.
So I just, on that particular thing, I always have trouble, because it's like, how do you claim to, know God, to know Jesus, read the Bible, and then say, well, this part doesn't really count, right?
Right.
So it's interesting. I'd like to be able to say, yeah, we're a united front, under God, against this. And then, you see churches, especially, we live in the St. Louis area, all over St. Louis, that would not affirm that.
Right. Yeah. And there's even like the churches so I was living in Milwaukee before I moved to Missouri. But even in St. Louis still, and in Milwaukee as well, I see so many churches with trans flags and the LGBTQ flags, and saying all are welcome here. We affirm whoever you are. They have the Black Lives Matter signs, and it's just truly incredible, and it's unthinkable, but it's
Mhm.
things that we have to think about and have to come to terms with because they are blatant. And it's just, yeah,
Yeah.
it's incredible how far religious institutions have fallen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, another thing that I say a lot on this show, because I've gotten so frustrated in the past several years of the silence of the pastors. And
Yeah,
I 100% believe that our country has gotten to the point where it is because pastors are afraid to speak up of what biblical truth actually is because it's offensive. I mean, it is. Like, the truth is offensive to someone who is not living in truth. And it's supposed to be. Like, it's supposed to offend you. It's not supposed to
yeah,
feel good. It's not supposed to make you
no,
happy because you're living against truth. You're living a lie. And God did not send his son for us to live a lie. Like, he wants us to be confronted in that so that way we turn from it and we don't continue in it. But I think for so long pastors have just fallen prey to this idea of, we want to welcome everybody, and we want everyone to feel welcome, and we want everyone to come back and all this, and it's like that's not your job. Your job is to teach the truth. And if people leave because of it, then let them leave. And then, trust that the Lord will bring them back. But yeah, sorry, I could like I get really I
no,
get
that's
really,
okay.
really frustrated with that, and especially, like what you're saying about churches just saying, "Oh, well, we're gonna affirm who you are." I mean, yes, absolutely. You can say you're welcome to come here, but because
Of
of
course,
because of scripture, we cannot affirm the way that you're living. And that goes for everything. I mean, that should go
yeah.
for everything. It shouldn't just be the outward sins.
Right, that's fundamental. And one of the things that people who are not religious, they're irreligious, and they attack Christians saying, well, you're not supposed to be judgmental. You're
Mm,
supposed to love your neighbor.
mhm.
And what I always say to them is those two things are not mutually exclusive. They're actually one and the same.
Yep.
And I understand that you don't understand that because you do not read the Word of God, and that's apparent in the way that you are weaponizing it against someone who does.
Yeah.
Because when it was said to love thy neighbor, it means as yourself, it means that you correct someone
Mhm.
when they're falling astray, as you would yourself.
Mm,
You wouldn't allow yourself to walk into a manhole, for example, and you shouldn't let the guy next to you either.
right.
If you see someone walking down a path that is fundamentally destructive and unproductive and sinful, you should treat them as you would yourself, which means to bring them back. And of course, you do that with love. And of course, sometimes that means tough love.
Yeah.
But when people say, well, you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself, you're not supposed to be judgmental, tell me where that says that in the Bible. Because from what I'm reading in front of me right now, says no.
Mhm.
Judgment sometimes is very necessary. And
Right.
we are not the ultimate judge. I
Right.
do admit that. But it's important to tell people when they are being led astray. That is part of the Great Commission. We are supposed to bring people to Christ. And Christ came and said, I will turn brother against brother,
Mhm.
mother against son. And in today's application, that might mean something like telling your very liberal aunt, hey, actually, no, what Dr. Fauci told all of us was not good.
Right.
A lot of that was a lie.
Right.
And you need to take that responsibility. It all comes back to personal responsibility.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. 100%. Well, guys, I hate
So,
to just kind of like chop it off here, but I'm coming up on my 90 minutes, so I usually try and stick to that. But I'd love to have you on again because I just think that it's refreshing to have these conversations with other people around the state, and especially, you are a younger generation than I am, and I think it's good to have all the different perspectives for sure. So, is there anything though before I let you all go that you would like to tell people? Any words of wisdom?
I guess, Nate, if
Um,
there's anything you want to throw in there. I've talked a lot. Sorry.
I mean, I think the point that we hit on really hard was if you have a talent, use it for good.
Mm-hmm.
Use it towards God's will. That I think if anything we hit on was super important. I think that may have been the most, just because it applied to everyone.
Yeah,
I agree.
And otherwise, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. And yeah, I think we'd both love to come back on, and maybe we can make this a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I mean, we're I'm sure gonna have lots to talk about for several months to come. So
Oh yeah.
I don't think we'll ever run out of things to talk about.
no, probably not.
No.
Probably not. Well, thank you both. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll be in touch, and we'll figure out another time for y'all to come back on.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Well, everybody, that was Nathan and Grace, and that was fun. It went a little bit of a different direction than I was thinking, which I also am totally fine with, because every morning when I come in, I just pray and ask God to fill my mouth with his words, to use me however he's needing to or wants to that day. Obviously, God doesn't need me. But this morning specifically, I was just kind of blank. I really didn't have a clear direction in my mind of what to talk about or where things were going to go or anything like that. And, it just goes the way that God wants it to then. And I hope that it was informational for you in some way, or maybe encouraging or challenging. I do really like what Nathan reiterated, that find your gifting. And if you can't figure it out, find someone who can draw that out of you, and that pulls that out of people. Like, I'm thinking of someone specifically in my life that is really good at drawing out what people are good at. And so anyway, I think that's super important. Find someone. And if you don't have anyone that you can think of that can draw that out of you, then pray for it, because God knows, or God will draw it out of you. So, but it is super important to be using the giftings that he has given for his glory, because that's why we're here in the first place. So let's not waste those talents. Let's not waste the time that we have. We're to be good stewards of all that he's given us. And that absolutely includes time. I think that a lot of people feel like stewardship applies to finances, and while it does, it absolutely applies to time. So let's be good stewards of that time that he's given us. And I'm just going to remind everyone again that it is 11 days till election, because the election is November 5th on Tuesday, not this coming Tuesday, the next Tuesday. In Missouri, you have several days to early vote, which I would encourage you to do. And normally you can do that at your county courthouse. I don't know if there are other early voting places, but I know for sure that you can do it there. So make sure to do that, and be prepared when you go in. There are a lot of things on the ballot, a lot. And like I said, Miss A and I will be on next week to talk about all of those things. So if you want to wait to vote until next Friday and you can listen to our show, do that. And just a reminder that JR will be in with the Big Shoe today, 2 to 4. And then Polly's Bomb Track Bunker will be on tomorrow night, 8 to 10. And I am live in the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Arts Studio, Damn Radio. And I just hope that you all have a wonderful weekend, and that until next time, you remember, let's not act like children.
You